Hello. Today we are going to continue Unit 3, our unit on writing a personal narrative. We're continuing with Lesson 3.6, our introduction to sensory details. So, getting into sensory details, our I can statement for today says I can use sensory details in my writing. And our essential question is what are sensory details? So, sensory details are details we add in our writing that relate to the five senses. Of course, we have hearing, sight, taste, smell, and touch. This is something we learn about when we're very, very young, but it's something that can be kind of difficult to add to our writing. So, we're going to start today by picturing ourselves at a lake, and we're going to kind of have a frame story based on us at this lake on sort of a hazy day. The lake's very beautiful, it's clear, there's mountains surrounding all around, and we're going to look at some examples. So, let's say we're writing a personal narrative about our day at the lake. And a poor example of a sentence talking about that experience would say something like, I rowed my boat across the lake. It's straight to the point. It mentions what we're doing. It does get the job done, but it doesn't really do anything other than that. A better use for that sentence, or a better example of that sentence, could say something like, I could see the clear blue water below me as I rowed across the lake. You'll notice in that one that we do have some sensory details. It says that you could see the clear blue water. Now, that's not bad, and that would be perfectly fine for what you were writing, but it doesn't necessarily give you a whole lot. For example, it uses the word see, and it just kind of comes out and says, this is what you're doing. An even better example, instead of telling us, shows us. It says, the clear blue water glistened, reflecting the sun despite a hazy sky above. As I rode, droplets of water leapt with the wind, clinging coldly to my skin. Okay, so this one clearly is going to take a little bit more effort to write, but it does give you a better picture of what's going on at the time. Remember, when you're writing a personal narrative, you want your reader to be in the story with you. You want them to see what's going on. In this one, they're not only seeing the clear blue water, they're not only seeing the sun shining in the sky or covered up by hazy clouds, they're feeling it. They feel the water clinging coldly to your skin. They feel the wind. You want them to be able to not only just picture what's going on, but kind of feel it with you. So let's break down some examples again. So here's an example without sensory details or really any details at all. Let's say that this is a student writing a personal narrative, and this is their attempt at their first paragraph. It says, I rowed my boat across the lake. It was a big lake, and I needed to return home quickly. Then it started to storm. It was pretty scary. I paddled so much, getting more and more scared, and I did not know if I would make it back okay. I can't wait to tell you my story of a very scary day. Now, again, it's not like the worst thing ever, but there's not really any detail in it, is there? It's giving you, here's something that happened, here's what happened next, and then pretty much just going ahead and telling you the whole story right off. There's a storm, it was pretty scary, and you had to paddle a whole lot and didn't know if you would be okay. Yeah, I'm kind of interested in seeing what happens, but it's not really pulling me into the story. So let's check what's wrong with example number one. What issues would starting a story out like this cause? After reading that, let's say that's the first paragraph of an essay my student wrote for their first paragraph of a personal narrative, rather, that my student wrote. I would advise them, instead of telling me, to try to show me. Bring me into the story with you. So let's say that a student wrote this example, and let's see how it is. This is an example with sensory and other details to try to pull me in. It says, the clear blue water glistened, reflecting the sun despite a hazy sky above. As I rode, droplets of water leapt with the wind, clinging coldly to my skin. I had spent hours on the lake, enjoying the crisp autumn air and the silence and stillness only nature can provide. Unfortunately, that peace and calm would soon be ripped from me, replaced with screams of pure terror and blinding flashes of lightning. I was soon to learn that even the most peaceful days could transform in the blink of an eye. Okay, so after reading that, I kind of want to know what happens in the story. Like, this sounds like uh, something that could be pretty interesting, something that goes from a peaceful, clear, beautiful, sunny day on the lake to something just utterly terrifying. I want to know what happened to them. How did they get out of this situation to write this personal narrative today? It's good. Is it perfect? Probably not, but is something written, I would be pretty happy. So now that we've seen why we should use sensory details, let's look at uh, the why. They help to make your story more interesting to read, and that's clear. Between those two examples, one was much more interesting than the other. They help to keep your reader interested in your story. We've all read things and not finished them. We've not cared to complete them because we lose interest. Personal narratives have to keep your reader interested the whole time. And they help the reader create a mental picture while they read your story. And I think this is probably the most important part. Whenever you're reading a story, you want to be able to picture what's going on in your mind. And this picture that you create is unique to you, but it's something that the author paints. Someone who writes a really good personal narrative paints that picture well for their reader. Okay, so now that we've introduced the basics of what sensory details are, let's practice. If you have a paper in front of you, list the 5 senses under where it says sense. So, of course, we have hearing again, sight, taste, smell, and touch. Then I want you to think about the story you will write. Write one sentence for each sense that you may use in your own story. Pause here and go ahead and complete that. All right, moving on and welcome back. You may have found in your practice that you struggled to come up with sentences for certain senses. The more you read the writing of others and the more you write yourself, the easier it will become to make your stories detailed and realistic. So don't expect to be like perfect the first, second, or even third or on times that you try. However, if you did have to leave a couple blank, maybe go back here in a little bit after we practice some more and see if you can come up with a sentence to go in each of those. So we are going to practice again, but this time it's going to be a little bit different. If you have a paper that you just worked on, flip it over. I want you to number 1 to 6 going down the left side of your paper. Leave space between each number so that you can write a little bit. You can use the whole page if you want, just number 1 to 6 going down the left side with some space between each. For each of the following slides, pause when directed and try to come up with as many sensory words as possible. List them, then continue the video. And just in case that doesn't make sense, we'll do an example together. So go ahead and number your paper and let's go. So in this example, we have a picture of fresh baked cookies. If you need to, close your eyes for a minute and picture fresh baked cookies coming out of the oven. Think of your 5 senses and what comes to mind. What words? Now, of course, most of the words that I came up with went with taste. Those cookies might be crunchy, they might be chewy, they're probably hot, which could be, the sense of touch. They might be soft, they might break apart in your hands. They probably taste rich, sweet, and maybe a little bit doughy. So that's all you have to do. Write down next to each of your numbers, whatever the scenario is, and then come up with a few sensory words to connect to each. Let's try number 2. So for number 2, we have swimming in the ocean. Now it's your turn. Pause the video here for a second. Try to write down a few words that connect with sensory details. Number 3, we have a totally different situation. Pretend you're at a busy mall. Pause here and come up with some words. Number 4, we have a cold winter day. Pause here and write your words. Number 5, we have a campfire late at night. Pause here. And number 6, to finish, we have a haunted house. Take a moment to pause, finish your words for this one and for any others that you wrote. Okay, so that's all for this lesson. Our review question is, what are the 5 senses? And how can they help your writing? In later lessons, we'll discuss a little bit more about how to use those sensory details and how things like using adjectives, adverbs, as well as figurative language can help complete it. But for now, this concludes the video portion of lesson 3.6.